I live in Boise now, in a 2-bedroom apartment just off State Street, the kind of place with thin walls and neighbors who leave their bikes in the hallway like it's an extension of their living room. I'm 29, I work in logistics for a regional outdoor gear company, and my life is stable. Not exciting, not miserable, just steady. It took me a long time to get here. When I was 14, my dad basically erased me. That sounds dramatic, but I don't really know how else to put it. My parents divorced when I was 12. It wasn't explosive, no screaming matches or police visits, but it was cold. Quiet resentment. My mom, Karen, worked as a nurse and pulled long shifts, and my dad, Greg, owned a small HVAC business. He was the type who cared more about appearances than feelings. Everything had to look normal from the outside. After the divorce, I stayed with my mom in our house in suburban Denver, while my dad moved into a townhouse about 20 minutes away. At first, he made an effort. Every other weekend, he'd pick me up, we'd go get burgers, watch a game, that kind of thing. It wasn't warm exactly, but it was something. Then about a year later, he met Lisa. Lisa had 2 kids, Ethan, who was 10, and Sophie, who was 7. They were loud, energetic, and everything I wasn't. I was a quiet kid. I read a lot, played some video games, kept to myself. Being around them felt like stepping into a different world. At first, I was just there, like an extra piece of furniture when I visited. Lisa would be polite but distant, and her kids didn't really know what to do with me. My dad seemed happier, though. More animated. Like he'd finally gotten the family he wanted. 6 months after they started dating, they got married. That's when everything changed. The first weekend after the wedding, I showed up at his place with my overnight bag like usual. Except it wasn't his place anymore. It was their place. Family photos already lined the walls. Lisa and her kids smiling at the beach, at Disneyland, at some pumpkin patch. My dad was in some of them. I wasn't in any. I remember standing in the living room, holding my bag, not sure where to go. Lisa looked at me and said, "Oh, we turned the guest room into Sophie's room." She needed her own space. I said, "So where do I sleep?" There was this awkward pause, and then my dad said, "We'll figure something out. Maybe the couch for now." For now turned into every time I visited. Within a few months, the visits got less frequent. There was always something. Ethan had a soccer game, Sophie had a recital, they had family plans. Eventually, it went from every other weekend to once a month. Then holidays only, then nothing. The last time I saw him in person as a kid, I was 14. He came by our house to drop off a birthday card. Didn't even come inside. Just handed me the envelope, said, "Things are a little hectic right now, buddy. We'll catch up soon." We didn't. At first, I kept waiting. I'd check my phone, hoping for a call or a text. I'd ask my mom if she'd heard from him. She'd just sigh and say, "Your father's made his choices." I didn't push it. I think part of me already knew. High school came and went without him. No graduation, no birthday calls, nothing. I found out through Facebook that he and Lisa had another kid, a boy named Noah. There were photos of my dad holding him, grinning like he'd just won the lottery. Family trips, matching Christmas pajamas, backyard barbecues. It was like I'd never existed. I didn't confront him. I didn't send angry messages or try to force anything. I just stopped expecting him to be my dad. My mom and I got closer, in our own way. She wasn't overly emotional, but she showed up. Every school event, every parent-teacher conference, every milestone. She worked insane hours, but she made it work. I got a part-time job at 16, saved up, went to a state school in Idaho, and never moved back to Colorado. For years. I didn't hear a single word from my dad, no calls. No emails, nothing. Then when I was 27, I got a message from him out of nowhere. "Hey, it's Dad. I know it's been a long time. I'd really like to reconnect if you're open to it." I stared at that message for a long time. Part of me felt something. Not excitement. Not exactly anger either. Just this weird, hollow curiosity. I didn't respond right away. I let it sit for a few days. Then I finally wrote back, "What do you want?" He replied almost immediately, "I miss you. I want to fix things." That annoyed me more than if he'd said nothing. You don't just miss someone you haven't spoken to in over a decade. That's not how that works. Still, I agreed to a phone call. We talked for about an hour. It was awkward. He kept trying to fill the silence with small talk, asking about my job, my apartment, whether I was dating anyone. Like we were catching up after a few weeks apart, not 13 years. At one point, I asked, "Why now?" He hesitated. Then he said, "I've been thinking a lot about the past. I realize I made mistakes." "Mistakes?" I said. "You disappeared." "I know," he said quickly. "And I regret that." Things were complicated back then. I almost laughed. Complicated, but I didn't argue. I just said, "Okay," we started talking more after that. Not often, maybe once every couple of weeks. It was surface level. Safe topics. Weather, work, general life stuff. He mentioned Lisa and the kids sometimes. Ethan was in college. Sophie was in high school. Noah was around 12. It was weird hearing about them like they were strangers I was somehow related to. After a few months, he asked if I'd be willing to visit. I said no. Not angrily. Just, no, I wasn't ready to step into that world. Not after everything. He seemed disappointed, but he didn't push. Then, about 6 months after we reconnected, he called me late one evening. I could tell something was off right away. His voice sounded strained. "Hey," he said. "Do you have a minute?" "Yeah," I said. "What's up?" There was a pause. Then he said, "I need your help." That was the moment everything clicked. Not emotionally, more like, logically, this wasn't about reconnecting. "Not really. What kind of help?" I asked. He exhaled. "My business. It's not doing well. We hit a rough patch during COVID and it never fully recovered. I've been trying to keep things afloat, but..." He trailed off. "But?" I prompted. "I'm in a lot of debt," he admitted. "And I'm running out of options." I stayed quiet. Then he said it. "I was hoping you might be able to loan me some money. Just until I get back on my feet." There it was. I leaned back on my couch and stared at the ceiling. "How much?" I asked. 50,000, he said, like he was asking to borrow a lawnmower. I actually laughed this time. $50,000? I repeated. "I know it's a lot," he said quickly. "But you've got a good job, right?" And I wouldn't ask if it wasn't serious. I didn't even know where to start. "You haven't been in my life for over a decade," I said slowly. "And the first thing you ask me for is 50 grand? "I'm not asking as a stranger," he said. "I'm your father." That word, father, felt almost absurd coming from him. "You stopped being that a long time ago," I said. "That's not fair," he shot back. "I made mistakes, but I'm trying to make things right now." "By asking me for money?" "By reaching out," he said, his voice rising. "By trying to rebuild our relationship." I let that sit for a second. "Would you still be trying to rebuild it if you didn't need the money?" I asked. Silence. That was my answer. He eventually said, "Look, I get why you're upset. But this is bigger than that. I could lose everything. The house, the business. Lisa and the kids are depending on me." I closed my eyes. Lisa and the kids. The family he chose. The one he didn't leave behind. "And you think I owe you something because of that?" I said, "No," he said, softer now. "I just thought maybe you'd want to help your family." I almost pointed out the irony, but it didn't feel worth it. Instead, I said, "I don't have $50,000 lying around." "That's not what you told me about your savings," he said. That caught me off guard. "What?" "You mentioned you'd been investing, that you had a good financial cushion," he said. "I'm not asking you to give it to me. It's a loan." I felt something shift then. Not anger exactly, more like clarity. "You've been keeping track of my finances?" I asked. "I was just listening to what you said," he replied defensively. "No," I said. "You were calculating." He didn't respond. I sat up, suddenly very awake. "You didn't reach out because you missed me," I said. "You reached out because you needed something." "That's not true," he insisted. But his voice lacked conviction. "It is," I said. "And honestly, I wish you'd just been upfront about it." "I didn't want it to seem like that," he said. "But it is like that." Another silence. Then he said, "So that's it? You're just going to let me lose everything?" I thought about that, about him losing the business, the house, the life he built without me, and I realized I didn't feel responsible for any of it. "I'm not the one who put you in this position," I said. "I'm your father," he said again, like repeating it would make it true. "And I was your son," I replied. Remember how that went? That hit harder than anything else I'd said. I could hear it in the way his breathing changed. That's low, he muttered. No, I said. What's low is disappearing from your kid's life and then showing up years later with your hand out. He didn't respond. For a second, I almost felt bad. Not enough to change my answer, but enough to recognize that this wasn't just a simple situation. Then I remembered being 14, standing in that living room with my overnight bag, being told to sleep on the couch in what used to be my dad's house. I'm not giving you the money, I said firmly. Even as a loan? He asked. Even as a loan. Another long pause. Okay, he said finally, his voice flat. I understand, but he didn't. Not really. We hung up shortly after that. I haven't heard from him since. Part of me expected another message. Maybe anger, maybe guilt-tripping, maybe one last attempt to change my mind. But nothing came. It's been almost 2 years now. Sometimes I wonder what happened. Whether he lost the business, whether they had to sell the house, whether Ethan or Sophie know I even exist, but it's more like a passing thought than something that weighs on me. I didn't get closure in the traditional sense. There was no big confrontation, no emotional reconciliation, just a phone call where everything finally made sense. And honestly, that was enough.